Many people say they want freedom in the world, but they may not know exactly how to achieve it, what it means to actually achieve it, and it's actually abolitionism. Many people may not have heard this word, or maybe you have heard this word and you heard about it through learning about history. From the 1800s, the word abolitionist meant to end slavery, but I'm going to break it down more here and share with you why it's actually very relevant if you want freedom now. In fact, it's the only thing that's going to help us attain freedom now, because the abolitionists in the 1800s, it worked for them. They were ending chattel slavery, they had to free people, and they needed to do that against a whole world that was opposed to their ideology at first. They were saying, wait, these guys are radicals, oh my gosh, they want to end slavery, they want to disrupt our economy, look at them, what are they trying to do? They were blamed on, the media was like throwing all these lies at the abolitionists, but guess who ended up winning? The abolitionist. So you might see some relevancy nowadays, but let's get into this. The word abolitionism from etymology means belief in the principle of abolishing something, originally purely in an anti-slavery sense, sourced from 1790. So originally the word abolitionism means to end slavery, essentially. And you can hear it in the words of William Lloyd Garrison, a abolitionist himself. He says it's the denial of the right to make man the property of man. And then from an 1846 alphabet book, it means A is for abolitionist, a man who wants to free the wretched slave and give to all an equal liberty, to all an equal liberty. And the word abolitionist, okay, so not abolitionism, but the word abolitionist from etymology means a person who favors doing away with some custom, law, or institution, or originally in reference to abolishing the institution of chattel slavery, which again is sourced from about 1792 to 1825, right? And this is chattel slavery's ball and chain, having all your labor taken from you against your consent, having to work for somebody who proclaims to be your master. And perhaps this whole dynamic of masters and slaves has not actually gone away, but transferred into different forms of slavery that people might be able to pick on today. Because if chattel slavery was one form, what about the other forms? So what is modern abolitionism? What slavery are we targeting today? If we want freedom in the world, and usually you might look at politics, you might look at government, you might look at the laws that are in place, and an abolitionist means you want to do away with some law, custom, or institution. Even the abolitionists of the past were against the governments and the laws because they were upholding slavery. What is modern abolitionism? It's merely the revival and continuance of the original abolitionism in ending all forms of slavery, particularly political slavery. Okay, now the first abolitionism was focused on ending chattel slavery, noting the problems with the closely associated political slavery. You may have never heard of political slavery. Well, our work as modern abolitionists is bringing their influential and powerful voices back to life. The American abolitionists were considered among the first voluntarists in helping the world in its evolution toward freedom. Living shortly thereafter the foundation of America, these guys, 1776, the foundation of America, 1840s or so, the abolitionists, not so long after, they noticed many problems concerning the government and its false claims of liberty, equality, peace, or security. Their cause for freedom from slavery constantly disregards political action, voting, elections, law changing, instead emphasizing the constant need for moral education. They were successful in shifting the moral conscience of the nation, having a ripple effect onto the rest of the world after being attacked relentlessly by the media. We intend to further the moral education of slavery in finishing the work they have started for ending political slavery with voluntaryism. Now, if you don't know what voluntaryism, that's okay. And when I say we, I mean the Liberator 2. This is an effort that I created, a website, a mass collaboration network. If you don't know about it, I have videos about this and articles as well. This is a mass project where you can get involved. You can send your articles. I'll turn it into videos. Everybody can get involved. There's a Truth in Music radio. There's a lot going on, and these are all in the efforts to attain freedom. It's not voting, it's not laws, it's not law changing, it's actually ending these systems that are not good for us. Not reducing them, but abolishing them. Big difference. Back then, there were people who were called immediatists, and they were the abolitionists, while there were some who were gradualists. They said, oh, well, what if we just make slavery better? What if we just pass some laws? And the abolitionists said, no, if it's wrong, it's wrong. Why should we accept it at all? Let's just stop doing it. And that is what made it very principled. As William Lloyd Garrison states, the abolitionism which I advocate is as absolute as the law of God and as unyielding as his throne. It admits of no compromise. Every slave is a stolen man. Every slaveholder is a man-stealer. By no precedent, no example, no law, no compact, no purchase, no bequest, no inheritance, no combination of circumstances is slaveholding right or justifiable. While a slave remains in his fetters, the land must have no rest. Meaning that the abolitionists are never going to end at attaining freedom. They're never going to give up. They're always going to keep charging on, doing what they know to be truthful, which is creating freedom. They know it's destined for humankind. They know mankind is not supposed to be enslaved by their fellow man. Here's another quote, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is William Lloyd Garrison quoting the Declaration of Independence, and he says, hence I am an abolitionist. Hence I cannot but regard oppression in every form, and most of all that which turns a man into a thing with indignation and abhorrence. Not to cherish these feelings would be recreancy to principle. They who desire me to be dumb on the subject of slavery, unless I will open my mouth in its defense, ask me to give the lie to my professions, to degrade my manhood, and to stain my soul. I will not be a liar, a poltroon, or a hypocrite, to accommodate any party, to gratify any sect, to escape any odium or peril, to save any interest, to preserve any institution, or to promote any object. What he says in this quote is essentially, I'm not going to support the government, I'm not going to support slavery, I'm going to promote the law of God and truth alone. That is my authority. Okay, now if you don't know what political slavery is and you want to learn about slavery, we have a separate video about this. I recommend checking that out and then come back to this video so you get a lot more of the context here. Moving on, we're going to talk about the solutions to political slavery. That is what abolitionism is, because here are people who understand what slavery is and now they want to put it to an end. So number one, you need to know what slavery is, and number two, then come back to this video and understand what the action is required to end that slavery. So what is this action? It's called voluntarism. From etymology, it's the principle of using voluntary action rather than coercion in politics, religion, etc. And that's sourced from around 1838. The word voluntary, from Latin voluntarius, means willing or of one's free will, and it's related to consent, which means to agree, give assent, yield when one has the right, power, or will to oppose, and that's sourced from around 1300. Okay, from voluntarist.com, there's an actual website, voluntarist.com, states, quote, voluntarism is the doctrine that relations among people should be by mutual consent or not at all. Okay? You have to question, is government a voluntary association? Did you consent to be within the government that you live in, or were you just born into it, having to sign things that you didn't consent to, and having to give your money away even if you don't want your money being given away, having to abide by certain laws even if you don't want to abide by those laws? The word voluntarist, from voluntarist.com, means voluntarists are advocates of non-political, non-violent strategies to achieve a free society. We reject electoral politics in theory and in practice as incompatible with moral principles. Governments must cloak their actions in an aura of moral legitimacy in order to sustain their power, and political methods invariably strengthen that legitimacy. So voting, elections, law changing essentially legitimizes the government's existence, and government by definition is involuntary and based on immoral actions that is cloaked and masked as if it's moral and necessary for order and we need it, otherwise there'll be chaos. And a lot of people have those concerns. And if you have those concerns, okay, so did I. A lot of people, we were programmed into thinking that is what we should be concerned about. But if we fear our freedom, we'll never truly be free. And this is why most of the people who claim to want freedom, they're actually never going to achieve it. Which is why I created this whole Liberator 2 project in the first place, was to bring the message back that the abolitionists also understood, which is that you need to look at the morality of the situation rather than voting in some politician or changing some law. You need to waken up the hearts and minds of the masses. From the original Liberator newspaper, it says, quote, "The triumphant progress of the cause of temperance and abolition in our land through the instrumentality of benevolent and voluntary associations, encourages us to combine our own means and efforts for the promotion of a still greater cause." Okay? William Lloyd Garrison states, quote, "As every human government is upheld by physical strength and its laws are enforced virtually at the point of the bayonet, we cannot hold any office which imposes upon its incumbent the obligation to compel men to do right on pain of imprisonment or death. We therefore voluntarily exclude ourselves from every legislative and judicial body, and repudiate all human politics, worldly honors, and stations of authority." As if some human beings have authority over other human beings. This is part of the very problem. I'll put some questions on the screen for you. You could also find these questions and question and test yourself at our quiz, the quiz that we have on the liberator.us website. You can find out, you can share that with others. Very helpful for getting these ideas understood. And here's William Lloyd Garrison, one of the most powerful, most influential abolitionists in the 1800s, saying himself that we want to do things voluntarily and we don't want to participate in the government because it's based on violence. It's not based on voluntary interaction. Even the lawyer and abolitionist Lysander Spooner stated, quote, "Government is in reality established by the few, and these few assume the consent of all the rest without any such consent being actually given." Quote, "The number of slaves, instead of having been diminished by the war, has been greatly increased, for a man thus subjected to a government that he does not want is a slave." I mean, he's literally saying, look, you're not actually free. Even if you think you're free, you're actually still not free as long as you're under a government. Abolitionists saying this, right? Now, there were many abolitionists who thought this way, and here are some of the notable ones, the outspoken ones from the 19th century. So you can call them voluntarists, you can call them abolitionists, but basically they understood all these ideas that I'm talking about. Their names include William Lloyd Garrison, Lysander Spooner, as I mentioned, but also Adin Ballou, Henry Clark Wright, Ezra Heywood, Josiah Warren, Charles Lane, Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Jeremiah Hacker, William Batchelder Greene, and Stephen Pearl Andrews. Again, there's a lot more that you can find, but as you also go into the 20th century, abolitionist works were being revisited by many individuals, including Leo Tolstoy and Benjamin Tucker, with the introduction of the term anarchism. From Greek, anarchon means no rulers, not no rules, otherwise known as voluntaryism. So if you do research on voluntaryism, you'll find out, wait, it's a form of anarchism, but it's emphasizing the rules, which is voluntary interaction. You cannot attain freedom in the very first place unless you have self-control, which is why the abolitionists had to teach the slaves how to read and write, how they had to educate themselves, because if they did not educate themselves, they would never be free in mind and therefore always be enslaved physically. Frederick Douglass says a man who knows how to read, who is educated, cannot be a slave, because it's education in the very idea of self-control and understanding the law of God or of the government of God or of nature's laws, natural law, whatever you want to call it. Having that empowers you so you can take control of your own life and therefore be a slave to no one, be ruled by no one, and rule yourself because you have rules and you do own yourself. So We're simply aligning to our nature and finding this out over time, and we at the Liberator 2 News, which I hope you get involved with, we have many resources concerning abolitionism and voluntaryism, including historical records, religious texts, philosophy, and educative material. I mean, you're talking about every single field you can think of. There's material for supporting what we're talking about. Now, what is the action of abolitionism, though? Because we want to get maybe a bit more specific. What are we exactly doing to attain freedom? Well, we have to encourage moral education, otherwise known as voluntaryism or modern abolitionism, for the end of political slavery, particularly the end of statism or mental slavery to the state. There's a belief system in the minds of the masses that is creating the world that we live in. So creating the slavery for others or for ourselves, there's a mind that we need to affect, a mind that we need to change, and that requires education. So originally, the Liberator was created to help end chattel slavery. Well, the Liberator 2 is created to help end political slavery. And you can talk with others and share that which goes against an individual's current belief system, and that can take care and patience and willpower and practice. There's actual work involved. It's not as easy as just casting some vote. That's not what's going to actually make you free. Now, you can't just write freedom on a piece of paper and all of a sudden you're free. It's merely the recognition that we are born free by nature and of a shared humanity, that we have to exercise our rights and learn how to do that, and that sovereignty or moral rules, the internal ruler, is required for freedom, which means there's no external rulers. Okay, so we shall assist each other in this work. What you have from 20th century abolitionist Leo Tolstoy is he states, quote, "The answer is very definitive, applicable and practicable, for its demands the activity of that one person over whom each of us has the real rightful and unquestionable power, namely oneself, and it consists in this, that if a man, whether slave or slave owner, really wishes to better not his position alone, but the position of people in general, he must not himself do those wrong things which enslave him and his brothers. And in order not to do the evil which produces misery for himself and for his brothers, he should first of all neither willingly nor under compulsion take any part in governmental activity, and should therefore be neither a soldier nor a field marshal, nor a minister of state, nor a tax collector, nor a witness, nor an alderman, nor a juryman, nor a governor, nor a member of parliament, nor in fact hold any office connected with violence." This is standing by principle. Another quote is, "The only means to destroy government is not force, but it is the exposure of this fraud." So that's education. In fact, if you use force, in the case of violence we're talking about, it's actually counterintuitive. It can make people look bad, make the cause look violent, and now people are not going to actually listen to you, or at least you're not going to get the right people listening to you, and it's going to become deadly. It's not going to be a moral cause anymore, okay? This is why a lot of the abolitionists were also non-resistants, okay? Another quote from Leo Tolstoy, again, one of the greatest writers of all time, "The age of veneration for governments, notwithstanding all the hypnotic influence they employ to maintain their position, is more and more passing away, and it is time for people to understand that governments not only are not necessary, but are harmful and most highly immoral institutions in which a self-respecting, honest man cannot and must not take part, in the advantages of which he cannot and should not enjoy. And as soon as people clearly understand that, they will naturally cease to take part in such deeds, i.e., cease to give the governments soldiers and money. And as soon as a majority of people ceases to do this, the fraud which enslaves people will be abolished. Only in this way can people be freed from slavery." Okay? So there's the solution summed up by Leo Tolstoy. Here's a solution summed up by some other people, like modern abolitionist Larkin Rose. He states, quote, "If you love death and destruction, oppression and suffering, injustice and violence, repression and torture, helplessness and despair, perpetual conflict and bloodshed, then teach your children to respect authority and teach them that obedience is a virtue. If, on the other hand, you value peaceful coexistence, compassion and cooperation, freedom and justice, then teach your children the principles of self-ownership. Teach them to respect the rights of every human being, and teach them to recognize and reject the belief in authority for what it is: the most irrational, self-contradictory, anti-human, evil, destructive, and dangerous superstition the world has ever known. Of course, he wrote a whole book called The Most Dangerous Superstition that goes into detail with this whole concept. And then finally, to conclude with a quote from modern abolitionist Jeremy Locke from his book The End of All Evil. He states, quote, "Personal sovereignty is the end of evil, when every person on earth will defend themselves and those they love, when evil cannot gain even a foothold because all people are watching for it and recognize that it seeks to destroy their value. This is the exact opposite of perfect evil, in which every person is a slave and a master of slaves. Perfect liberty is life, and in it there are no slaves and no masters of slaves. Perfect liberty is life." Thank you very much for watching. Like I said, I recommend checking out our video on slavery and political slavery so you can get the final puzzle piece to this video. But if you want to get involved and want to share this message and get involved with abolitionism, getting to the roots of how we actually attain freedom, unlike the rest of independent media, unlike most of the world, which is why we created this project, and soon I don't have to say that because these ideas are growing exponentially, I want you to be a part of it. I want you to get involved. We need to get involved. And so go to the Liberator.us, the Liberator.us. Thank you very much for watching.